Hello guys, I'm Sajja Rabi. Recently I've got new computer with RTX 3090. As you know, this graphic card is so powerful especially because it has 24 GB of memory. So I decided to test it out in Houdini 18.5 with Neo Minima Solver, which is using GPU instead of CPU. So it will be much faster than regular Pyro Solver. In the past few weeks, I did a couple of tests with Minima Solver, playing around with parameters to see how is it working and if it's possible to use it in the production or no. But before start talking about this subject, let me show you some of the results which I've got directly with Minima Solver. In the first project, I tried to simulate explosion. As you see, we have very nice details on the smoke and the fire area. I tried to use very high density pyro shader to show you how small details we have. This project is made by three different layers of pyro simulation, one for the shockwave, another one for the trails at the beginning, and of course, another one for the main explosion. The simulation times for the main explosion, it was about 1.3 seconds per each frame. I tried to simulate this project with the CPU as well, of course for 100 frames, and the overall simulation times for the CPU it was about 32 minutes or 90.6 seconds per each frame, while it was just about 2 minutes for the GPU or 1.3 seconds per each frame. So it means that the GPU was about 15 times faster than CPU. In the next project we have just fire simulation, and still we have very good details on the fire. For this project, the simulation times with the CPU was about 11 minutes or 6.5 seconds per each frame, and for the GPU it was about 2 minutes or 1.6 seconds per each frame. So in this particular project, Minima Solver was about 4 times faster than CPU. And finally, in the last project, we have both fire and smoke simulation with a very good result. For the last project, the simulation times with the CPU was about 49 minutes or 29.5 seconds per each frame, and for the GPU it was about 4 minutes or 2.5 seconds per each frame. So Minima Solver in this project was about 12 times faster than CPU. And here is my machine specification which I've used for this test. Core i9 10900KF as a CPU, 64 GB of memory, and of course RTX 3090 with 24 GB of memory. After a few weeks playing with the Minima Solver, I find it so useful and it's so fast and it can really help us to improve our speed of production, but it has some limitation as well, which I am going to talk about them now. For working with the Minima Solver, you need just to create geometry network and dive inside it, type GPU and use Pyro configure GPU explosion, which is giving you a very simple setup of explosion. In the first step, we have new Pyro source in Houdini for generating some points with all of the attributes. For example, the burn, temperature, and velocity. In the next step, we are going to convert these points to the VDB with three different fields, burn, temperature, and V. And finally, we have Pyro Solver. If you are going to the Solving tab, Advanced, you should see that the minimal OpenCL Solve option is on, which means that what we are seeing in the viewport is the result of Minima Solver, and that's why it's so fast. To have better look, let me create a simple light source, maybe with more exposure. Let's try 13. That's good. To have better look and more details, let's try to decrease the voxel size in the setup to some number like 0.05, and we still have fast result. If we are checking the GPU memory, currently we are using about 8 GB of memory, so we can decrease voxel size to some smaller number like 0.0, let's try 22. As you see, the simulation times is slower now, and that's normal because currently we are using more voxels. And about GPU memory, we are using about something about 23 or 22 GB of memory. So I think that's the minimum number which we can use for the voxel size based of our GPU memory size. As I said, we have some limitation with Minimal Solver. Some of the features of PyroSolver are not supporting with the Minimal Solver. The most important one is the automatic resizing. Whenever you are working with the Minimal Solver, you have to use fixed size of the container. Maybe it's not a big deal for in the case you don't need to have very large scale container. For example, for fire simulation, because we don't have any expansion, we can use very small scale of the container. But for the explosion, because of the expansion, you need to have a large scale of the container. So in that case, you have to spend more time to play with the max size, center, and voxel size based on your memory of the GPU to find the minimum value which you can use for the for your graphic card. And of course, we have some other limitation as well. For example, whenever you are working with the Minimal Solver or even a standard OpenCL in the Pyro simulation, you have to use any kind of the microsolvers that are supporting OpenCL. For example, let me append gas disrupt node. If you are going to the advanced tab, we have use OpenCL option. If you forget to turn it on whenever you are working with the Minimal Solver, the Minimal Solver is not fast anymore. And unfortunately, not all of the microsolvers in the Houdini are supporting this OpenCL option. Also, I should mention that whenever you are working with the Minimal Solver, the export part is off because at least for now, the main reason of Minimal Solver is to have something for doing our look development. Because it's so fast, we have more time to play with the parameters of the PyroSolver to find the best value for the best result. And whenever you are happy about your result, you can switch back to the CPU and write out your data to the disk. But if you have good graphic card and you are happy about the result of the Minimal Solver, why not try to use the output of the Minimal Solver directly for your final renders? Why we should wasting our time to resimulate everything again with the CPU? In that case, you can just use a regular file cache node in the Houdini to write out the output of the Minimal Solver to the disk, and there is no problem at all. Maybe someone is interested to know what's the difference between minimal OpenCL Solve and regular OpenCL. I would say that whenever you are working with minimal OpenCL Solve, it's going to use a NanoVDB library from the NVIDIA, which is so optimized for the GPU. But whenever you are working with the OpenCL, it's just using Houdini standards volume for its simulation. So minimal OpenCL Solve is faster than regular OpenCL. As a final word, I would say that it's not possible to use Minimal Solver and RTX 3090 for all of the projects. It depends to what you want to do and your project. Maybe if you want to simulate something which doesn't need to have very large scale container like file simulation, of course you can count on it and it's giving you very good result. But for example, for the explosion, or even in the case you want to control your simulation with lots of microsolvers, it's better to use Minimal Solver only for doing your log development and using CPU for your final simulation. I think even 24 GB of RTX 3090 is not enough for all of the projects. Maybe we need to use dual RTX 3090 or even wait for the next generation of the graphic cards with more memory and of course with a reasonable price. Okay. Of course, in Houdini, we have some other tools which are using GPU as well. But in this video, I just wanted to show you how RTX 3090 is working with the Minimal Solver in Houdini 18.5. Maybe in the next video, I can show you some simple tips and tricks about working with the Minimal Solver. And thanks for watching this video and see you next time.